Tonight we enter dangerous territory. Your unprocessed relationship with productivity, rest, and that voice in your head that whispers you're not doing enough at 3:47 a.m. while you're lying there, calculating how many hours of sleep you'll get if you fall asleep right now. We're talking about projection, self-sabotage, and that internal hamster wheel you've been running on since you decided busy was a personality trait and grinding was a spiritual practice. Forget the hustle harder mantras. You're nervous. System has abandonment issues. Your adrenal glands are filing for divorce, and your soul needs therapy, not another productivity hack. You say you're living intentionally, but panic every time your calendar has a blank space, like it's a personal attack on your character. You claim you're mindful, but your idea of meditation is listening to a 10-minute guided session while mentally organizing your grocery list and wondering if you remembered to respond to that email from 3 days ago. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. The insomniacs in Tokyo, the overthinkers in London, the existentially exhausted in New York. Relax, adjust the volume, and make sure your inner critic is in airplane mode. You're no longer in your bedroom. You're inside the mind of someone who thinks overthinking is a spiritual practice, and anxiety is just consciousness trying to solve problems that don't exist yet. The good news, your soul wants to rest. The bad news, it brought wine, unpacked your entire relationship with self-worth, and has some very pointed questions about why you think your value is directly proportional to your output. This video is for you if you're exhausted from carrying the weight of constant motion disguised as purpose. If you find yourself scrolling at 2 a.m. not because you're entertained, but because stopping feels like death, like if you're not consuming information or producing something visible, you might just evaporate into the meaningless void of existence. If you've forgotten that being still isn't the same as being stuck, and that your worth isn't measured by your output, your efficiency, or how many things you can accomplish before noon, this is for you if you're tired of feeling tired, if rest feels like a luxury you can't afford, rather than a necessity you can't survive without. If you've been running so long that you've forgotten what you're running toward, or worse, that you're actually running away from the profound discomfort of simply being present with yourself. If the idea of doing nothing for an entire hour without checking your phone, planning your next move, or improving yourself in some measurable way makes you break out in a cold sweat. Carl Jung once said something that should be tattooed on every overachiever's forehead. Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. But here's what Jung didn't mention in his infinite Swiss wisdom. Looking inside requires you to stop running first, and most of us would rather sprint into traffic, sign up for 17 online courses, or reorganize our entire lives than sit with our own thoughts for 20 consecutive minutes without a podcast, audiobook, or some form of intellectual stimulation drowning out the sound of our own consciousness. We live in a culture that has weaponized rest, turned relaxation into another form of productivity, and transformed self-care into another item on our endless to-do lists. Somewhere along the way, doing nothing became a moral failing. Taking a nap feels like a confession of laziness that requires 3 forms of justification, and staring at the ceiling without checking your phone feels like wasted time that could have been spent optimizing, improving, or at least learning something useful from a TED Talk. But what if I told you that your desperate need to always be productive, to constantly be moving towards some goal, to perpetually be becoming a better version of yourself, is actually the thing blocking everything you're trying to create? What if your addiction to productivity is the very force keeping you from the life you think all this productivity will eventually give you? The hidden power of boredom reveals something profound about your energetic field, something that every productivity guru conveniently fails to mention because it would put them out of business. When you're constantly in motion, constantly consuming information, constantly producing something visible, constantly improving yourself through courses, books, podcasts, and optimization strategies, you're operating from a frequency of lack, the deep unconscious belief that if you stop moving, if you stop growing, if you stop becoming, you'll disappear into irrelevance. Your hyperactive mind isn't productivity, it's self-sabotage disguised as ambition. It's spiritual materialism dressed up as self-improvement. It's the ego's sophisticated strategy to keep you so busy becoming someone else that you never have time to discover who you already are. You're so busy creating movement that you've forgotten how to create space for anything genuinely new to enter your life. Think about water. Really think about it. Water only reflects the sky when it's completely still. The moment you disturb the surface with even the slightest movement, the reflection fragments into 1,000 broken pieces, each shard containing a distorted piece of truth, but none of them showing you the whole picture. Your reality works the same way. When your mind is agitated, when you're constantly stirring the waters of your consciousness with worry, planning, endless mental chatter, and the compulsive need to always be doing something meaningful, you can't see clearly. You can't reflect truth. You can't access the deeper intelligence that emerges only in the profound stillness that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. But we've been conditioned to fear this stillness like it's a deadly disease. We mistake it for stagnation, confuse rest with regression, and we've bought into the lie that movement equals progress, that busy equals important, that if we're not constantly climbing some invisible ladder of success, achievement, or self-improvement, we must be falling behind everyone else who seems to have figured out the secret to perpetual motion. This is the great deception of our time. The belief that your value is directly proportional to your productivity, that your worth can be measured by your output, that love must be earned through performance, and that rest is something you deserve only after you've proven yourself worthy through sufficient amounts of doing, achieving, and becoming. Your nervous system is running on fumes, interpreting rest as danger, stillness as death, and emptiness as evidence that you're not living life correctly. Every time you try to be still, your mind floods you with urgent thoughts, imaginary deadlines, creative ways to feel guilty about not being somewhere else doing something more important, and a constant stream of reminders about all the ways you could be optimizing this moment instead of wasting it on something as frivolous as simply being alive without an agenda. This isn't consciousness. This is trauma response disguised as motivation. This isn't spiritual evolution. This is nervous system dysregulation masquerading as personal development. This isn't living. This is surviving, and you've been surviving for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to actually be alive. Jung understood something that modern productivity culture has not only forgotten, but actively suppresses because it threatens the entire edifice of consumer capitalism. The psyche requires emptiness to create. The unconscious mind needs space to reorganize, to process, to integrate the tremendous amount of information, experience, and stimulation it receives every single day. When you fill every moment with input, consumption, task completion, and the relentless pursuit of self-improvement, you're essentially putting duct tape over your soul's mouth and then wondering why you feel spiritually muted, creatively blocked, and emotionally exhausted. The unconscious doesn't operate on your timeline. It doesn't care about your deadlines, your goals, or your 5-year plan. It works in cycles, in seasons, in the mysterious rhythms of organic growth that cannot be rushed, forced, or optimized. When you deny it the space and time it needs to do its essential work of integration and reorganization, it begins to rebel. It sends you symptoms, insomnia, anxiety, creative blocks, existential dread, and the persistent feeling that despite all you're doing, you're not actually getting anywhere meaningful. The illusion of progress is perhaps the most sophisticated trap of our era, the golden cage that keeps intelligent, sensitive people running in circles while believing they're moving forward. We mistake motion for movement, activity for achievement, busyness for being alive. We've created elaborate systems of measurement to track our progress, habits, apps, goal-setting frameworks, productivity systems. But what if all this tracking is actually keeping us trapped in the very patterns we're trying to transcend? Here's the paradox that will shatter everything you believe about success, achievement, and the good life. The more desperately you chase progress, the further you drift from genuine transformation. Real change doesn't happen in the doing. It happens in the being. It happens in those quiet moments when you stop trying to become someone else and start accepting who you already are. It happens when you stop running towards some imaginary future version of yourself and start inhabiting the fullness of who you are right now in this moment, with all your imperfections, limitations, and beautiful human messiness. Your mind cannot create from a state of constant beta brainwaves, that high-alert, analytical, problem-solving frequency that keeps you scanning for the next thing to fix, improve, or accomplish. Beta is the frequency of survival, of task, completion of getting things done. But creation happens in alpha states, in those dreamy, receptive moments when your consciousness softens and becomes permeable to new possibilities, when the rigid boundaries between self and world dissolve just enough to let something genuinely new emerge. But alpha states require one thing most of us are terrified of: surrender. The willingness to let go of control, to stop trying to direct the flow of your experience, to trust that something greater than your conscious mind knows what needs to happen next. Surrender isn't giving up. It's giving in to the deeper intelligence that operates beneath the surface of your everyday awareness. The flower doesn't grow through effort. It doesn't set daily goals, create vision boards, or panic about its growth timeline. It doesn't compare itself to other flowers or worry that it's not blooming fast enough. It simply exists in a state of fertile receptivity, allowing the conditions for growth to naturally occur. It trusts the process even when nothing visible is happening, especially when nothing visible is happening, because it understands that the most important growth occurs in darkness, in silence, in the hidden depths where roots deepen and strength accumulates. But humans, we try to grow through force, we try to manifest through desperation, we try to create through control. We approach our lives like problems to be solved rather than mysteries to be lived. We want to see progress every day, measure our advancement every week, and achieve our goals according to our preferred timeline. And then we wonder why our dreams feel so far away, why our efforts feel so effortful, why success feels so elusive despite all our sophisticated strategies for achieving it. This brings us to a profound truth about manifestation that most spiritual teachers won't tell you, because it would undermine their entire business model. The field responds to what you are in silence, not what you declare in desperation. The quantum matrix of possibility that surrounds you at every moment is exquisitely sensitive to vibration, but not the vibration of your words, your affirmations, or your positive thinking. It responds to the vibration of your being, the frequency you emit when you think no one is watching, the energy you carry in those quiet moments between sleep and waking, when your defenses are down and your true self is revealed. You can recite affirmations until your voice gives out, visualize your desired outcomes with Academy Award-winning detail, and practice gratitude with religious devotion. But if your underlying vibration is anxiety, scarcity, and the frantic need to control outcomes, that's what you're actually broadcasting into the quantum field. That's the frequency the universe is receiving, and that's what it will mirror back to you with mathematical precision. When you're in constant motion, driven by the urgency to change, fix, or improve your life, you're operating from a vibration of not enough time, not enough progress, not enough results, not enough proof that you're doing life correctly. This frequency of lack becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, creating a reality that confirms your deepest fears about scarcity, struggle, and the need to work harder to get what you want. The universe hears your energetic signature, which is pure desperation disguised as motivation, and matches it with experiences that confirm your scarcity. More things to do, more problems to solve, more reasons to stay busy and stressed, and perpetually unsatisfied with your current level of achievement. But when that frequency shifts to one of peaceful being, joyful allowing and grateful receiving, when you stop trying to get somewhere else and start celebrating where you are, the field responds with experiences that match that vibration, opportunities that flow naturally, relationships that nourish deeply, circumstances that support your highest expression without you having to force, manipulate, or exhaust yourself in the process. Seeds don't sprout because you yell at them. They don't grow faster because you dig them up every day to check their progress, or because you play them motivational speeches about the importance of rapid germination. They germinate in darkness, in silence, in the fertile void of not knowing what will emerge. Your dreams work the same way. They require periods of incubation, times when nothing visible is happening but everything essential is taking shape beneath the surface of your awareness. The frequency of rest is not the absence of creation, it's creation in its most potent form. When you allow yourself to truly rest, not just physically but mentally and emotionally, when you give your nervous system permission to downregulate and your mind permission to wander without purpose, you're entering a state of vibrational coherence that reorganizes your entire energy field. This isn't laziness, it's alignment. This isn't wasted time, it's sacred time. This isn't being unproductive, it's accessing a different kind of productivity that operates according to natural rhythms rather than artificial deadlines, that honors the organic cycles of inspiration and rest rather than the mechanical demands of constant output. Neuroscience has discovered something remarkable about boredom, something that validates what mystics have known for millennia. When your mind has nothing specific to focus on, when you're not actively engaged in task-oriented thinking, the default mode network of your brain becomes highly active. This network is responsible for self-referential thinking, moral decision-making, creative insight, and the integration of disparate pieces of information into new patterns of understanding. In other words, the moments when you think nothing is happening are actually when your brain is doing its most sophisticated work. The times when you feel like you're wasting time are often when your unconscious is making the most important connections, solving problems you didn't even know you had, and preparing insights that will emerge days, weeks, or months later with perfect timing. But we've criminalized these moments. We've pathologized stillness, demonized boredom, and turned every spare moment into an opportunity for optimization. We reach for our phones the instant we feel the slightest gap in stimulation, terrified of what we might discover in the silence, afraid that if we're not constantly consuming information or producing something visible, we might have to face the profound questions that arise when the noise stops. Who am I when I'm not doing anything? What do I actually want? What am I avoiding by staying so busy? We've become addicted to input because we're afraid of what exists in the space between thoughts. We've developed a compulsive need for distraction because stillness reveals things about ourselves, our lives, and our choices that we're not ready to face. We stay busy not because we love being productive, but because we're terrified of being present. The guilt around rest runs deeper than cultural conditioning. It's an existential terror of insignificance that strikes at the very core of human consciousness. If you're not producing something, creating something, achieving something, then what proof do you have that you exist? What evidence do you have of your worth? What justification can you offer for taking up space on this planet? This is the wound at the heart of our productivity obsession. The belief that being isn't enough, that you must constantly do in order to deserve space on this planet, that your existence requires justification through achievement, that love must be earned through performance, and that rest is a luxury you can afford only after you've proven yourself worthy through sufficient amounts of doing. But this belief system is not only false, it's actively harmful. It creates a relationship with life based on scarcity, competition, and the constant need to prove yourself, rather than a relationship based on abundance, collaboration, and the recognition that your existence is inherently valuable, regardless of what you produce. Winter teaches us something profound about the cycles of creation that our productivity-obsessed culture desperately needs to remember. The tree doesn't apologize for being bare in January. It doesn't frantically try to grow leaves in the middle of winter or feel guilty about its apparent dormancy. It doesn't compare itself to evergreens or worry that it's falling behind some imaginary schedule of growth and flowering. The tree trusts the wisdom of the season, allowing its energy to move inward, to consolidate, to prepare for the explosion of growth that will come in spring. The tree appears dormant to the casual observer, but it's actually growing more during winter than any other time, growing roots, deepening its foundation, strengthening its core, preparing for the expansion that will become visible when conditions are right. Your soul has seasons too, natural rhythms of expansion and contraction, of outward expression and inward consolidation, of visible growth and invisible strengthening. Sometimes you're meant to bloom, to produce, to share your gifts with the world in tangible, measurable ways. And sometimes you're meant to go dormant, to pull your energy inward, to rest in the fertile darkness of not knowing what comes next, to trust that something essential is happening, even when nothing appears to be happening. Both phases are equally sacred. Both are necessary for sustainable growth. Both serve the larger pattern of your unfolding. But our culture only validates the spring and summer phases, the times of visible growth and external achievement. We've forgotten how to honor the autumn and winter phases, the times of harvest and rest, of integration and preparation, of apparent dormancy that is actually the deepest form of creativity. The field, that quantum space of infinite possibility that surrounds you at every moment, responding to your consciousness with the precision of a cosmic tuning fork, doesn't distinguish between action and rest. It only recognizes vibration. And here's what will revolutionize your relationship with productivity. Your vibration is often higher when you're at rest than when you're in frantic motion. Stillness allows you to access coherence, that harmonious state where your heart, mind, and nervous system are synchronized, where your thoughts, feelings, and actions are aligned, where your inner world and outer world are in perfect resonance. In coherence, you're not fighting yourself, forcing outcomes, or swimming against the current of your own nature. You're in flow, in alignment, in the effortless state where right action arises naturally without struggle or strain. When you're coherent, when you're vibrationally aligned, you don't need to chase opportunities. They begin to chase you. You don't need to force outcomes. They naturally unfold. You don't need to convince the universe of your worth. Your worth becomes self-evident through your presence. You don't need to exhaust yourself trying to make things happen. Things begin to happen through you, with an ease that feels almost magical, but is actually the natural result of alignment. The sun doesn't run after the flower, desperately trying to provide light and frantically worrying about whether the flower will grow properly. It simply radiates its essence, maintaining its natural frequency, and everything within its field responds accordingly. The sun doesn't doubt its value, question its purpose, or exhaust itself trying to prove its importance. It simply is what it is, and that being is enough to sustain all life on Earth. This is the secret of effortless creation, becoming so clear about your true nature, so aligned with your authentic vibration, so at peace with your essential self, that your external reality naturally reshapes itself to match your internal state. Not through force, manipulation, or desperate effort, but through the irresistible magnetism of authentic being. But this level of alignment requires something our culture actively discourages: the willingness to be still long enough to remember who you are beneath all the doing, all the achieving, all the constant becoming. It requires the courage to face the void, that terrifying space where you're not achieving anything, not producing anything, not proving your value through external measures. Most people can't handle 30 seconds of true emptiness without reaching for a distraction. We've become so identified with our thoughts, our plans, our constant mental activity, that silence feels like death. We've confused our doing with our being so completely that when the doing stops, we panic that we might cease to exist. But silence isn't death. It's birth. It's the womb of all creation. It's the space where new possibilities are conceived, where insights are born, where the next phase of your evolution is quietly taking shape. The void isn't empty. It's pregnant with potential, alive with possibility, vibrating with the seeds of everything you've ever wanted to create. When you learn to rest in the void without immediately trying to fill it with noise, activity, or stimulation, you discover that it's not empty at all. It's full of presence, full of awareness, full of the profound aliveness that exists, independent of any external circumstances. This fullness can't be achieved through doing. It can only be revealed through being. Sleep becomes a powerful portal when you understand its true nature, and stop treating it as merely a biological necessity or a temporary pause in your productivity. You're not just shutting down for 8 hours. You're entering a state of consciousness where your deepest programming gets rewritten, where your subconscious mind is most receptive to new information, where your nervous system repairs and regenerates, where your soul communes with dimensions of reality that are inaccessible to your waking mind. Your subconscious mind, freed from the constraints of logical thinking and the demands of conscious control, begins to reorganize your beliefs, integrate your experiences, process your emotions, and align your energy with your truest desires. This isn't passive downtime. It's active reconfiguration at the deepest levels of your being. But most people go to bed carrying the same frequency of stress, worry, and dissatisfaction that plagued them all day. They bring their problems into their sleep, replay their frustrations as they fall asleep, and wonder why they wake up feeling more tired than when they went to bed. They treat sleep as an unavoidable interruption to their productivity, rather than the foundation that makes all productivity possible. Sleep isn't just physical rest, it's energetic reconfiguration, it's psychological integration, it's spiritual renewal. And the quality of that renewal depends entirely on the vibration you bring to your pillow, the thoughts you think as you surrender consciousness, the emotional state you carry into the realm of dreams. Neville Goddard understood this principle with startling clarity. He taught that the state of consciousness you fall asleep in determines the reality you wake up to. This isn't metaphysical speculation, it's practical psychology, based on the understanding that your subconscious mind is most impressionable in those drowsy moments before sleep, when your critical faculty is relaxed and your imagination is free to work without the interference of logical objections. This is why your bedtime routine matters more than your morning routine. This is why the thoughts you think as you drift off are more important than your morning affirmations. This is why the emotional state you cultivate as you fall asleep has more influence on your reality than any goal-setting session or visualization exercise you might do during your waking hours. You're literally programming your unconscious mind with the last vibration you offer before surrender. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between what's real and what's imagined. It simply accepts whatever you're feeling and thinking as you fall asleep as the truth about your reality. Make it count. The mind that learns to rest vibrates at a higher frequency than the mind trapped in constant motion. Speed is often a form of spiritual anesthesia, a way to avoid feeling the deeper currents of your emotional landscape, a strategy for staying ahead of the discomfort that arises when you slow down enough to feel what's actually happening inside you. When you're always moving, always busy, always consumed with the next task, the next goal, the next thing to improve or achieve, you never have to face the profound questions that arise in stillness. Who am I when I'm not doing anything? What do I actually want? What am I avoiding by staying so busy? What would happen if I stopped trying to become someone else and started being who I already am? These questions terrify most people because they reveal the gap between who we think we are and who we actually are. They expose our attachments, our fears, our desperate need for external validation, our addiction to the story of progress and improvement, our terror of being ordinary, of being enough exactly as we are. But these questions are also doorways to freedom. They're invitations to discover the part of yourself that exists independent of achievement, success, or productivity. They're gateways to the aspect of your being that is inherently valuable, naturally creative and authentically magnetic without any effort or striving. Your frequency, your energetic signature, the vibration you emit simply by being alive, isn't measured by how much you accomplish, but by how deeply you can rest in your own being. The most magnetic people aren't the busiest people. They're the most present people. They've learned to access that state of inner stillness that allows them to respond rather than react, to create rather than struggle, to attract rather than chase. Presence is the ultimate productivity hack, but it can't be hacked. It can only be cultivated through the willingness to be where you are, when you are, as you are, without the constant need to be somewhere else, someone else, or something else. Presence emerges when you stop trying to get somewhere and start appreciating where you already are. The art of pausing is perhaps the most undervalued skill in our hyper-connected, always-on, perpetually stimulated world. A pause isn't empty space. It's pregnant space. It's the moment between inhale and exhale where all possibilities exist simultaneously. It's the sacred gap between thought and action where wisdom emerges. It's the space where quantum leaps are born, where insights Arise, where the next right step reveals itself without effort or strain. Every archer knows this principle intimately. The bow must be drawn back before the arrow can fly forward. The greater the tension in the pulling back, the more powerful the release. The deeper the pause, the more potent the action that follows. Your life works the same way. Sometimes you need to retreat, to pull back, to gather your energy before you can leap into your next level of being. But our culture has convinced us that stepping back is stepping down, that pausing is failing, that any moment not spent in forward motion is a moment wasted. We've been programmed to believe that if we're not moving forward, we must be moving backward, that if we're not growing, we must be dying, that if we're not achieving, we must be failing. This is the lie that keeps you trapped in exhausting cycles of effort without effectiveness, motion without meaning, productivity without purpose. This is the myth that prevents you from accessing the profound wisdom that emerges only in stillness, the creative insights that arise only in emptiness, the solutions that appear only when you stop trying to figure everything out. True magnetism doesn't announce itself. It doesn't chase attention, demand recognition, or try to prove its value through constant demonstration. It simply is. Like a black hole in space, it creates such a powerful gravitational field through its very being that everything in its vicinity is naturally drawn toward it. This is the power of presence, the ability to be so fully yourself, so completely at peace with your own existence, that others can't help but be affected by your energy. The magnet doesn't run after the metal, pleading with it to be attracted. It doesn't convince, manipulate, or exhaust itself trying to create attraction. It simply maintains its magnetic field, and the metal is irresistibly drawn to it through the natural laws of physics. Your authentic self works the same way. When you stop trying so hard to be impressive and start simply being yourself, when you stop chasing validation and start validating yourself, when you stop performing worthiness and start embodying it, you become naturally magnetic. This shift from doing to being isn't just philosophical, it's neurological. When you're constantly in action mode, your nervous system is locked in sympathetic activation. The fight-or-flight response that floods your body with stress hormones, keeps you scanning for threats, narrows your perception to focus only on immediate survival needs, and severely limits your access to higher brain functions like creativity, intuition, and complex problem-solving. In this state of chronic sympathetic arousal, your creativity is limited to finding quick fixes and short-term solutions. Your intuition is muted by the noise of constant mental chatter and the urgency of immediate demands. Your capacity for deep thinking is severely compromised by the need to constantly respond, react, and keep moving. But when you learn to access parasympathetic activation, the rest and digest response that governs healing, growth, and restoration, your entire system reorganizes itself. Your heart rate variability improves, indicating greater resilience and adaptability. Your prefrontal cortex comes online, giving you access to higher-order thinking, emotional regulation, and executive function. Your intuitive faculties sharpen, allowing you to perceive subtle energies and make decisions from a place of inner knowing rather than mental calculation. This is why meditation isn't just stress relief, it's cognitive enhancement. This is why rest isn't just physical recovery, it's neurological optimization. This is why doing nothing isn't just permission to be lazy. It's preparation for your highest level of functioning. This is why silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's the presence of profound intelligence. The contemplative tradition has always understood what modern science is now proving. Consciousness is not produced by the brain, but expressed through it. Your brain is not the source of awareness, but the instrument through which awareness operates in physical reality. And the quality of that expression depends entirely on the state of the instrument. A relaxed, coherent, internally quiet mind becomes a clear channel for wisdom, creativity, and insight. A stressed, fragmented, constantly active mind becomes a distorted lens that colors everything with anxiety, limitation, and the persistent feeling that something is wrong and needs to be fixed immediately. Your being, your essential nature, stripped of all roles, achievements, and identities, is already whole, already perfect, already enough. This isn't New Age positive thinking. It's the fundamental truth of existence that gets obscured by the constant noise of becoming, achieving, and trying to earn your place in the universe through performance. The doing is just decoration. It's the way your being expresses itself in the world, but it's not the source of your worth. It's the dance your essence does with form, but it's not your essence itself. When you understand this distinction, when you remember that you are inherently valuable regardless of what you produce, everything changes in the most fundamental way possible. You stop measuring your days by how much you accomplished and start measuring them by how present you were. You stop evaluating your worth by external metrics and start recognizing the inherent value of your existence. You stop trying to earn love through performance and start accepting that you are lovable simply because you exist. You stop treating rest as something you have to deserve and start recognizing it as something you need to survive and thrive. This isn't New Age philosophy. It's practical psychology that has profound implications for how you live, work, love, and relate to yourself and others. When you no longer need external validation to feel valuable, you make decisions from a place of inner authority rather than people-pleasing. When you no longer equate productivity with worth, you can rest without guilt and work from inspiration rather than desperation. When you no longer believe that busy equals important, you can choose consciously how to spend your energy rather than scattering it across 100 meaningless tasks that keep you feeling productive but don't actually move you toward what matters most. The space between thoughts is where your real life exists. The pause between breaths is where your soul resides. The silence between words is where truth lives. But we've become so afraid of emptiness that we fill every gap with noise, every silence with chatter, every stillness with movement, every moment of potential boredom with stimulation, distraction, and the compulsive need to be doing something, anything other than simply being here now. What if emptiness isn't something to be feared, but something to be cultivated? What if boredom isn't a problem to be solved, but a doorway to be entered? What if the void isn't an enemy to be defeated, but a friend to be embraced? What if nothingness isn't the opposite of everything, but the source from which everything emerges? The void is where all creation begins. It's the fertile darkness of the womb, the rich soil of the earth, the quantum field of infinite possibility. It's the space before the first word is spoken, the silence before the first note is played, the emptiness before the first thought arises. When you learn to rest in the void without immediately trying to fill it with content, meaning, or purpose, you discover that it's not empty at all. It's pregnant with potential, alive with possibility, vibrating with the seeds of everything you've ever wanted to create. Your relationship with nothingness determines your capacity for everything. If you can't be comfortable with emptiness, you'll compulsively fill your life with distractions that keep you from your true purpose. If you can't sit with silence, you'll surround yourself with noise that drowns out your inner wisdom. If you can't rest in being, you'll exhaust yourself with doing that leads nowhere. Meaningful. But when you make friends with the void, when you learn to find peace in the pause, when you discover the profound fullness that exists in apparent emptiness, you gain access to a completely different way of living. You begin to move from stillness rather than toward it. You begin to act from rest rather than toward rest. You begin to create from wholeness rather than from the need to feel whole. This is the great reversal that changes everything. Instead of doing in order to be worthy of rest, you rest in order to be worthy of doing. Instead of achieving in order to deserve peace, you find peace in order to achieve naturally. Instead of becoming someone in order to be valuable, you recognize your inherent value and let your becoming flow from that recognition rather than from the desperate need to prove yourself. The mystics throughout history have all pointed to the same truth using different words, symbols, and practices. The kingdom of heaven is within you, and it's accessed not through effort but through surrender. Not through doing but through being. Not through reaching but through receiving. Not through grasping but through letting go. Not through trying to get somewhere else but through recognizing that you're already where you need to be. This doesn't mean becoming passive, resigned, or apathetic. It doesn't mean abandoning your dreams, goals, or desires for growth and contribution. It means becoming so centered in your own being, so rooted in your own worth, so connected to your own essence, that your actions arise from inspiration rather than desperation, from love rather than fear, from abundance rather than scarcity, from the overflow of your being rather than from the desperate attempt to fill some imaginary void. When you operate from this place, work becomes play. Effort becomes effortless, struggle becomes flow. You're no longer trying to prove yourself to the world, you're simply expressing yourself in the world. You're no longer trying to get somewhere else, you're celebrating where you are. You're no longer trying to become someone different. You're becoming more fully who you've always been beneath all the layers of conditioning, expectation, and the need to be someone other than yourself. The field of consciousness that surrounds you, the quantum matrix of possibility that responds to your vibration, doesn't care about your resume. It doesn't measure your value by your achievements or your worth by your productivity. It doesn't judge you for taking breaks, needing rest, or having days when you don't accomplish anything visible. It simply mirrors back to you the frequency you're broadcasting, the energy you're embodying, the love you're feeling for yourself and for life. When that frequency is one of frantic doing, desperate seeking, and anxious becoming, the field responds, with experiences that match that vibration. More things to do, more problems to solve, more reasons to stay busy and stressed and perpetually unsatisfied with your current level of achievement. The universe becomes a cosmic taskmaster, always presenting you with more evidence that you're not doing enough, not working hard enough, not trying hard enough to deserve the life you want. But when that frequency shifts to one of peaceful being, joyful allowing and grateful receiving, when you stop broadcasting the energy of I'm not enough and start embodying the truth of I am enough, the field responds with experiences that match that vibration. Opportunities begin to flow naturally without you having to chase them. Relationships become more nourishing without you having to force connection. Circumstances align to support your highest expression without you having to manipulate, control, or exhaust yourself in the process. This is why rest is revolutionary in a culture that profits from your exhaustion. This is why stillness is subversive in a system that requires your constant consumption and production to function. This is why doing nothing can fix everything. Not because problems magically disappear when you stop trying to solve them, but because you stop creating new problems through your desperate efforts to control outcomes you were never meant to control in the first place. In the space of not doing, your natural intelligence emerges from beneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and the compulsive need to figure everything out with your conscious mind. In the silence of not thinking, your innate wisdom speaks, in the quiet voice that can only be heard when the mental chatter subsides. In the stillness of not moving, your authentic self is revealed in all its ordinary magnificence, without the costumes of achievement, productivity, or the constant need to be improving yourself. And from that place of clarity, coherence, and alignment with your true nature, right action arises naturally, effortlessly, joyfully, not because you forced it into existence through willpower and determination, but because you've created the internal conditions that allow life to express itself through you with grace, ease, and perfect timing. You don't need to force your life to work through constant effort and vigilant control. You don't need to manipulate circumstances to fit your agenda through strategic planning and relentless execution. You don't need to exhaust yourself trying to make things happen according to your preferred timeline and desired outcomes. You simply need to become so present, so peaceful, so authentically yourself that life naturally organizes itself around your true nature, like iron filings aligning with a magnetic field. This is the promise of rest. Not that you'll get more done, but that what you do will matter more. Not that you'll achieve more goals, but that your goals will arise from a deeper place of knowing what's truly important, rather than what you think should be important. Not that you'll be more productive, but that your productivity will serve a higher purpose than just keeping you busy and feeling important. The process of remembering how to rest begins with the radical recognition that you are not your productivity. You are not your achievements. You are not your to-do list, your goals, your plans, or your constant efforts to improve yourself. You are the awareness in which all of these activities appear and disappear. You are the consciousness that observes the doing without being diminished by periods of not doing. When you identify completely with your activities, rest feels like Death because it threatens the very foundation of who you think you are. But when you recognize yourself as the space in which all activities occur, rest becomes a return home to your essential nature rather than a departure from your identity. This shift in identification is perhaps the most important inner work you can do in a culture that has convinced you that you are what you do rather than who you are. It's the difference between resting from exhaustion and resting from fullness. It's the difference between collapsing, because you can't go on, and pausing, because you choose to honor the natural rhythms of expansion and contraction that govern all life. The nervous system that has learned to rest deeply operates from a fundamentally different baseline than the nervous system trapped in chronic activation. When your default state shifts from anxious readiness to peaceful presence, everything changes. Your thoughts become clearer because they're not clouded by the constant urgency to act. Your emotions become more stable because they're not amplified by the stress of always having to be somewhere else. Your relationships improve because you're actually present with people rather than mentally rehearsing your next task while pretending to listen. Most importantly, your creativity explodes because creativity requires the kind of mental spaciousness that only emerges in states of deep relaxation. The greatest insights, solutions, and innovations throughout history have emerged not from intense effort, but from moments of profound rest. The apple falling on Newton's head while he was lounging under a tree, Einstein's breakthrough realizations during long walks, Tesla's visions arising in states of deep meditation. The modern productivity myth has convinced us that breakthrough insights come from grinding harder, thinking more intensely, and pushing through resistance with greater force. But the opposite is true. Breakthrough insights emerge from the gaps between thoughts, from the spaces between efforts, from the profound silence that allows something genuinely new to emerge, rather than just recycling old patterns with slightly different packaging. Your nervous system is constantly making calculations about safety and threat, and chronic busyness registers as chronic threat. When you're always in motion, always responding to demands, always managing multiple streams of information and responsibility, your nervous system interprets this as evidence that you're in danger, that the environment is hostile, that you need to stay hyper-vigilant to survive. This chronic threat detection doesn't just affect your stress levels, it affects your entire worldview. When your nervous system is stuck in survival mode, you perceive the world as a place of scarcity, competition, and constant challenge. You approach relationships from a place of defense rather than connection. You make decisions from fear rather than love. You create from desperation rather than inspiration. But when you teach your nervous system that it's safe to rest, safe to be still, safe to exist without constantly proving your worth through performance, your entire perception shifts. The world begins to feel like a friendlier place. Opportunities appear where you previously saw only obstacles. People seem more helpful, circumstances more supportive, life more generous in its offerings. This isn't positive thinking or wishful delusion. It's the natural result of shifting from a nervous system state of chronic defense to one of open receptivity. When you're not constantly scanning for threats, you become available to notice the abundance that was always there, but was invisible to your hypervigilant awareness. The practice of conscious rest begins with small moments of deliberate non-doing throughout your day. It's the decision to take 3 conscious breaths before checking your phone. It's the choice to spend 5 minutes looking out the window without trying to accomplish anything. It's the radical act of eating a meal without multitasking, of taking a shower without planning your day, of walking without listening to a podcast or making phone calls. These moments might seem insignificant, but they're acts of rebellion against a culture that has convinced you that every moment must be optimized, every experience must be leveraged for some form of growth or productivity. They're small but powerful ways of reclaiming your right to exist without justification, to be present without purpose, to rest without earning it through prior achievement. As you practice these micro moments of conscious rest, something remarkable begins to happen. The quality of your presence deepens. Your capacity for stillness expands. Your tolerance for emptiness increases. You begin to discover that boredom is actually a doorway to creativity, that silence is actually full of information, that doing nothing is actually a profound form of self-care that has nothing to do with laziness and everything to do with wisdom. The deepest rest comes not from doing nothing, but from being everything, from recognizing yourself as the vast awareness in which all experiences arise and pass away. This isn't a philosophical concept, but a lived reality that becomes accessible as you practice releasing your grip on the constant need to be doing something meaningful with every moment of your existence. In this state of profound rest, you discover that you are not separate from life, but are life itself, expressing through the unique lens of your individual perspective. You're not a separate being, trying to manipulate life to conform to your desires, but life itself exploring what it's like to be you, to see through your eyes, to love through your heart, to create through your hands. This recognition dissolves the fundamental anxiety that drives most compulsive doing. The fear that if you're not constantly working to improve your circumstances, they will naturally deteriorate. When you recognize yourself as life itself, you realize that life is inherently creative, inherently intelligent, inherently moving toward greater wholeness and expression. You don't need to force this movement, you need to align with it. Alignment with the natural intelligence of life requires periods of deep listening, profound stillness, and the kind of receptive awareness that can only emerge when you stop trying to direct every aspect of your experience. It requires trust in something greater than your individual will, wisdom deeper than your personal knowledge, love more expansive than your individual capacity to care. This trust isn't blind faith, but intelligent surrender based on the recognition that the same force that beats your heart, grows your hair and heals your wounds, without any conscious effort on your part, is also orchestrating the larger patterns of your life. The same intelligence that manages the incomprehensibly complex ecosystem of your body is also weaving the seemingly random events of your external experience into a meaningful pattern that serves your highest evolution. But you can only perceive this larger intelligence, this deeper pattern, this meaningful orchestration, when you're still enough to sense it, quiet enough to hear it, relaxed enough to trust it. When you're constantly in motion, constantly trying to control outcomes, constantly second-guessing the natural flow of your experience, you miss the subtle guidance that's always available, the perfect timing that's always operating, the profound love that's always supporting your journey, even when it doesn't look like what you expected. The invitation is to experiment with radical trust in the intelligence of rest, to explore what happens when you stop trying to earn your existence through constant achievement and start receiving your life as the gift it has always been. This doesn't mean becoming passive or irresponsible. It means becoming responsive to the deeper currents of your being, rather than reactive to the surface demands of a culture that profits from your exhaustion. As you cultivate this new relationship with rest, with stillness, with the profound peace that exists at the center of your being, regardless of what's happening in your external circumstances, you begin to live from a different place. Your actions become expressions of love rather than attempts to avoid punishment. Your work becomes service rather than survival. Your relationships become celebrations rather than strategies for getting your needs met. The quality of your entire life transforms when you remember that you are already whole, already worthy, already enough exactly as you are in this moment. Not after you achieve your goals, complete your projects, or become the person you think you should be, but right now in the midst of all your imperfections, limitations, and beautifully human messiness. This remembering doesn't happen through more doing, more trying, more effort to improve yourself. It happens through less resistance to what is, less judgment of what you discover when you're still, less need to be anywhere other than exactly where you are right now. So tonight, as you prepare to surrender to sleep, consider this radical possibility. What if your rest is not the opposite of your productivity, but the source of it? What if your stillness is not the enemy of your success, but the foundation of it? What if your being is not separate from your doing, but the wellspring from which all meaningful action flows? Let yourself sink into this possibility, like you're sinking into the most comfortable bed you've ever experienced. Let your nervous system downregulate like a computer slowly shutting down all its programs. Let your mind release its grip on tomorrow's To-do list like you're letting go of a heavy bag you've been carrying all day. Let your soul remember what it feels like to exist without agenda, to be present without purpose, to rest without guilt. In this space of profound relaxation, of deep letting go, of complete surrender to the present moment exactly as it is, you're not wasting time. You're investing in the quality of every moment that follows. You're not being lazy. You're being wise. You're not doing nothing. You're doing the most important thing of all. Remembering who you are when all the doing falls away, when all the roles are released, when all the masks are removed, and only your essential self remains. And from that remembering, from that coming home to yourself, from that profound rest in your own being, everything else will naturally, effortlessly, joyfully unfold in its own perfect timing, in its own perfect way, serving the highest good. Of all beings, including the most important being of all. You exactly as you are, exactly where you are, exactly when you are. Write in the comments, I choose my rest as a sacred act. Let's see how many of you are ready to embrace this revolutionary approach to living, this radical act of self-love, disguised as simple relaxation. Tell me what you'd like to explore in our next journey together. The most upvoted comments will likely become your next dose of nighttime wisdom, your next invitation to remember what you've always known, but temporarily forgot, in the beautiful madness of trying to become someone other than who you already are. Until then, rest well, knowing that in your stillness you are exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do, being exactly who you need to be. The universe is not waiting for you to become better, more productive, or more worthy of love. It's celebrating you exactly as you are right now, in this moment, in all your perfectly imperfect humanity. Sweet dreams, fellow traveler. May your rest be deep, your sleep be peaceful, and your dreams be filled with the remembrance of your own magnificence.